Hi, welcome back to our channel. We regularly upload interesting videos on different stories. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy it. Today I'm going to explain a French horror drama movie called The Swarm. Please be aware the video contains spoilers. Virginie is a single mother, lives in rural France with her two children Laura and Gaston. She has been unsuccessfully trying to raise locusts for protein. She doesn't even have time to take her son for soccer practice, so she asks Laura to take her brother to the pitch. While she is watching her little brother play soccer from the sidelines, some seemingly older teenagers pick on her. A man named Brian arrives and offers to buy the already made locust flour. Upon realizing that amount of it is so little, he backs out from the deal, which stresses Virginie out even more, struggling financially. She borrows money from Karim. They can't even afford to keep the lights on in the evening. Laura sits in her room watching a video on her phone about the bullies making fun of her mother's products. They call it gross and disgusting. We can see Gaston having a great time feeding his pet locusts. He even holds one of them in his hand. He then notices the locusts have eaten a wart on his finger. Fascinated by this fact, he tells his mother, who then tells him to stop doing weird stuff with the insects. They arrive in the town where Gaston notices the bully from the soccer pitch. Laura then goes in, questions him about the humiliating video. He then makes fun of her dad being a goat farmer. Laura, fed up with the guy's trash talking, decides to take matters to her hand and slaps the guy across the face. They get into a brawl which is broken off by her mother. At home, Laura expresses her feeling about being a laughingstock at school because of her mother's profession. They are chatting about selling all the stuff from the lab and starting over the next day. The buyer comes and takes all the 40 kilos of insect flour, but complains about the thickness. The man tells her that if it wasn't for Karim, he wouldn't have bought it. He only pays 200 and the rest is paid by Karim. Enraged by the man's disrespectful tone, she goes on a rampage, breaking the lab. She slips and hits her head on a plank when she awakens. She notices that the locusts were feeding on her blood. At night she has a talk with Karim about the business and her money issues. We learned that Virginie used to work as a nurse's aide in a nursing home. On the walk home, she observes some locusts outside of the lab wall. The next day, when she walks in, she takes off the bandages from her wound and sticks her arm in the inner room, full of raging insects. Despite the immense pain, she endures it, giving her own blood for the family's well-being. She then decides to clean the wound, pulling several mandibles out of it. The children get home early as there were no soccer games that day. She puts Gaston to bed and asks Laura to get off her phone. She puts on a beekeeper's suit and investigates the locusts in the lab. She notices that they haven't even touched their food she put out for them earlier. This gives her the brilliant idea of expanding the lab even further. Karim comes over and helps her with setting up things. Laura is totally devastated by her mother's decision. Virginie shows her son the insects and he remarks that they seem significantly bigger than before. She tells him that she gave them parsley. That's why they have grown so big. She forbids her son going in there alone ever again. Gaston is so fascinated by the new locusts that he puts one in his own terrarium as well. At the dinner table, Gaston has a locust in a cardboard box. The locust sucking in so much steroid from Virginie's blood it can even lift the box by jumping inside it. Laura smacks the cardboard box in anger. She questions her mother about selling the laboratory and starting over. They start shouting with each other, which abruptly ends with Laura leaving the dinner table. We can see that the freshly brought in locusts have devoured their weaker mates. At night we can see Virginie preparing a nice meal for the already hungry insects. Inside, she cuts her arm and sits inside, where she is swarmed with insects feeding on her blood. She then goes out to Karim, who is still working at the vineyard. Late at night, they chatter about the lack of rain and Virginie shows no interest going to a farmer's fair, where she could have had a stand next to Karim. She has other plans with her product. She is only going to make animal food from it. The next day, she drove to the duck farmer's house with 150 kilograms of flour. The man buys all of it. She casually orders pig blood on the phone, which arrives the very same day from the bush. Her neighbor snoops on her and seems distressed about the expansion of the lab. The delivery guy even jokes about her feeding them blood. She mixes the blood with a little pectin to make jelly out of it so the insects will not drown in it. Laura helps her mother with the packaging, while Gaston takes the family goat on a walk to the fields nearby. At 2 a.m., Laura notices her mother walking out to the locusts. She becomes suspicious of her in the morning. Her friend from school, Luke, comes over and is being very surprised about the number of locusts they have. He asks her about moving, but she refuses to reply. Laura, once again having anger issues, and begins to destroy the freshly set up expansion of the greenhouses. She cuts open the bags which they keep the insects in. Now the locusts are free to roam and it is a disaster waiting to happen. It doesn't take long before the swarm reaches the car in which Gaston sits. They devoured the family goat. In a matter of seconds, Virginie finally gets home and immediately stopped by his son, who tells her that the locusts have taken the goat. She rushes to the house and tell the children to get inside. She finds the half-eaten carcass of the goat. Once she got back, she lies to the children about it, and after she scolded Laura for cutting the bags open, she goes out with Gaston to look for the goat. She lets her son roam around the field alone while she remains in the car. The following morning they decide to go to the beach and have a family picnic, just as nothing has happened. She promises to send Gaston to soccer camp next week, which he is very happy about. They finally have a peaceful moment as a family when they get home. Kareem is already there with a scooter. Laura asks about it, and he tells her that it's a present from her mother. Kareem and Virginie enjoy a glass of wine in the garage and things get a little hot in no time, but she stops him before they get to second base. The success of the new feeding methods is undeniable, as we can see workers setting up 2 new greenhouses. She even wants to cut down a tree, which Gaston is very much against because it was the tree of the family goat. She then gives in and decides to set up the greenhouse at another location. Previously, her order for pig's blood got denied, so she makes a difficult decision to use her own blood for feeding the locusts. Kareem becomes a little suspicious about the rapid expansion of the farm and questions Virginie. The situation between them is still tense from last night's events. So Kareem leaves at night. The neighbor's dog wanders over to their property and she feeds it to the insects. Gaston has a nightmare about the locusts being overpopulated and breaking free. While cleaning up the remains of the dog, Virginie is disturbed by her daughter, telling her she has visitors. The duck farmer came to buy more locust flour. He also brought one of his colleagues. She shows them around the lab. All while Laura helps his brother packing things up for the soccer camp. He doesn't really want to leave home at night. Virginie butchers a calf from a local farm and drains the blood of it. Laura brings Gaston to the bus and their mother fails to show up when she gets home. She walks into her mother's room where she finds the blood-stained clothes. She searches for her mother in the lab and finds her sitting in the middle of the lab feeding the locusts with her own blood. Having a panic attack from the scene she just witnessed, she runs back to the bathroom. She sends a message Kareem that something is wrong with her mom. Kareem arrives at the house and meets Virginie. When she tries to walk to the next room, she collapses from the blood loss caused by the feeding. They drive over to Karen's place. Laura almost tells him the truth, but she gets interrupted by her mother walking in. Kareem tells Virginie that she needs to take better care of her daughter. They leave the house and decide on going home. The neighbor snoops around the greenhouses searching for his dog. He opens one of the bags filled with locust and finds some blood stains on the ground. While backing the car, Kareem decides not to leave things hanging and sneaks into one of the greenhouse. As it happens to be the greenhouse which the neighbor was in, and he finds his ravaged corpse. He then flees back to his car, unaware to the fact Virginie blames her daughter. For this, he decides to come back with a gas canister, pouring it all over the lab, and the greenhouse is burning them to the ground. The insects are swarming out of the burning greenhouses. Virginie still wants to put out the fire. Kareem and Laura flee inside the house. He notices the locusts piling up on one of the windows, completely blocking it. Virginie's efforts are all in vain as she cannot stop the fire. She runs back to the house as well to look for her daughter. She finds Kareem barely clinging to his life, completely covered in insects. Laura runs out to the forest. She seeks shelter under a boat at the nearby lake, surrounded by a colossal cloud of locusts. They swarm the boat as Laura cries out for help. Her mother, Virginie, covers her face with her blood to save her daughter's life. The insects brutally swarm her, but she succeeds with her plan, barely surviving the heroic act. They fall into each other's arms as the sun comes up. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. Thanks.